My name is Sharita Henderson, and I am a survivor of the 2018 Waffle House mass shooting on April 22nd, 2018. And those 42 seconds changed my life forever. I was shot 3 times and lost my best friend as a result. I put my body on top of hers, trying to protect her, and unfortunately the bullet went through me. She and I, our sorority sisters, went to an event for our brother fraternity. She was still in college. I was outside of college. I was working at the time, but she was like my little sister and my best friend, and we hung out every weekend. We went to that party at the Tennessee State Fairgrounds and then got hungry. We hadn't eaten all day. So our natural instinct was to find a restaurant that was late open, and we went to a Waffle House. And unfortunately, that decision changed both of our lives forever. Since then, I have been advocating for resources for victims and survivors of mass violence. It changed everything for me. I had to learn how to walk, talk, write. I had to have assistance to move, to sit up in the beginning, and I've had to learn how to walk 3 times since then. I was shot twice in my arm. One of the bullets went through to my chest and now resides outside of my lungs by about a centimeter. Then I was also shot in my leg as well. It shattered my leg, severing it almost completely. It hung on by tendons and skin. My first 2 surgeries were 18 hours apiece, and they were the life-saving surgeries. And I've had 26 as a result. 7 years later.
I'm Sharita, and these are my thoughts.
Before the Waffle House mass shooting, I was a director of promotions for Cumulus Media. I was a young 24-year-old, probably the youngest that ever did it at Cumulus Media as a director of promotions, and all of that changed. I have not been back to work since April 22nd, 2018. At the time, there were extremely limited resources and services, almost non-existent. When I was in the hospital, of course, they had a therapist there, but they weren't necessarily qualified to handle survivors of mass violence. At the time, I was triggered by white men and had a nurse. He looked like the perpetrator, and I couldn't deal with it, and they had to remove him from my service. And fortunately, he got to come back once I had enough strength to recognize that he was not the person who hurt me, but someone trying to help me. The resources that were available at the time, I didn't even know that there were any resources. Someone from my sorority works for the Tennessee Victims group, and so they were able to find me a therapist that was also my sorority sister. So there was someone there that I could identify with. Unfortunately, for a lot of the survivors of the Waffle House mass violence event, they did not have therapists that could identify with them. Someone that looked like them, talked like them, were a part of organizations that they were a part of, had community ties. It took a lot for us to have to deal with some of the things we had to deal with. It's important to have people that are there and resources available that can help, whether it's faith-based, whether it's race-based, socioeconomic-based. A lot of us did not have resources available for some of the bills that came as a result of our injuries. If you think I've had 26 surgeries, imagine how much that costs. There was no financial help for us unless it was donations from the community. There was no organized resources available for us, just GoFundMe. That was split between all of us. Some of the hurdles that I experienced was having to do physical therapy, being in the hospital, transitioning to a rehabilitation center, transitioning back home. Home health aides, we had to find resources for someone to stay with me so that my parents could have something as simple as a meal together or a date night. They wanted to make sure that their marriage stayed intact because oftentimes divorce is a result of being a victim or a survivor of a mass violence event. We had support from our community, which was amazing. And something as simple as sitting with someone, my experience was a lot different than one of the other survivors that did not have such a large community. We were able to extend our community to her. For me, it was keeping friends that could deal with what I had been through. Some of them even had trauma from it and are no longer around in my life, which is unfortunate. But I've had a great support system and people that have stepped up, and even people that have surprised me and new people that were introduced as well. I have amazing doctors, so they were able to help me through a lot of my hurdles. It was Dr. Jahunger. He is also known as the COVID doctor that Middle Tennessee had, and he went above and beyond for me. Even went to the same high school, and that doctor saved my life. There are challenges every day. There's pain that you experience, physical, mental, spiritual, finding new things that I can do, getting things that I couldn't do for a long time back. Another hurdle that I experienced is not having a peer group that I could go to talk with other survivors or even other victims' families. There was no one that even put us in the same room together up until the trial. The trial was the first time that we heard other versions of the story, and we had to relive our trauma together. One of the benefits was I brought my therapist at the time to the trial thinking that I would need her, but one of the other families needed her more. Recently, a hearing for a retrial. That's something that we did not have any knowledge of prior to it happening, and then you're only giving a couple of days to realize that you have to relive this trauma all over again. And you do have a victims advocate through the DA's office, but oftentimes they're overwhelmed because they have so many cases. My family experienced harassment from the media, and even having someone from the media leak my phone number. And then they used it to try to get members of my friends and family to donate money to a Cash App. But even having some of the hurdles, no one walking you through what it's going to be like to sit in the room with the perpetrator again. There's no victims fund that really was accessible for us at the time. We didn't qualify for it, even though my medical bills were beyond what most people can imagine. Thankfully, we've been able to stay afloat, but some families are not as fortunate. I think that's one of the disparities between some of the mass violence events that have happened in Nashville and even Middle Tennessee, is there's a drastic difference between some of these socioeconomical families and representation for those families. They have more access to resources, they have more access to therapists. Almost no one through our event even had a therapist with them or has seen a therapist so far. Some of us have spiritual leaders that have been there for us, but even they are not equipped to deal with what victims and survivors of mass violence have been through. Covenant and the Antioch High School mass shootings had those resources available, and I'd like to think that's because of some of the advocacy work that those of us who survived the Waffle House mass shooting were able to yell and scream and beg for 7 years. What I needed in the first 3 months is different than what I need in year 7. The need for support is always there. What it looks like to have job security for my parents. They took off a lot of time. Fortunately, I still have my personality, so I use that and my knowledge of social media to advocate for other people or mental health support. Worked with the American Red Cross. I received letters and cards from kids in their classrooms writing, "Get well, Miss Sharita," and they didn't even know me. Now I go back to those schools and I talk to them about gun violence, and I talk to them about how they can help their own communities. The more I talk about it, the more I am able to deal with it. Sharing my story early on is probably what kept me alive the most. Having people get to know the victims and survivors, and not just when it's trial time or when it's in the media, helps us and helps them. The powers that be are not doing enough to make the policy changes that we need in order to support victims more. I think sometimes perpetrators get more support than the victims and survivors, and we're the ones left behind that have to deal with the result of their crimes, and they have more access to mental health help than the victims. Not equitable upon arrest. A lot of the resources available are not set aside for those of us that actually need them. Everyone has a right to due process, but so do the victims and the survivors, and there's not enough done for us. The support from the judge in our criminal case, identifying with my victim's statement, and they were warlike injuries, greatly impacted his decisions in sentencing. No matter what the perpetrator tries to do, I'm going to be there every step of the way as a spokesperson for D. Ebony Groves, Torian Sonderland, Joe Perez Jr., Aquila Da Silva. Those are the people that can't speak anymore. well, I want to keep doing this work because they deserve to be here no matter what.